To become secure, I have to have value. I want to be worth something. I want to be worth enough to attract the attention of others. But I still don't understand myself. I don't even know what it is that makes me myself. How can I love myself?
In the act of observing others, you may find and recognize yourself. And yet, you cannot see yourself without the presence of others.
Because there are others, I can perceive myself as an individual. If I am alone, then I will be the same without others. For if this world is only of me, then there will be no difference between me and nothing.
Has it taken you this long to realize that? What an idiot!
I think that out of all the anime I have watched, there has never been a series that has left a longer lasting impact on me than Neon Genesis Evangelion. When Evangelion was first released on October 4th, 1995, its initial impression was that of your entry-level mech anime. However, it was clear that Evangelion had so much more to offer under the surface, with relationships like Shinji and his father being strained at best, and the clear tales of manipulation that Shinji experiences into piloting an Eva from the other adults around him like Misato, which will slowly become more and more twisted as the anime goes on. Moments like these hinted that this anime has something more to offer, something that viewers had never seen before, and tackles some of the most interesting and unexplored themes about us as people. Evangelion at its core is a journey of escapism, self-discovery, and finding your own enjoyment in life, which is visualized in the way Shinji evolves over the course of the anime, with the anime mainly focusing on a person's worth. As to Shinji, this means everything, which is clear from the get-go. He doesn't like to be a burden to anyone, and doesn't really feel all that loved or cared about, with him essentially being abandoned by his own family and left to fend for himself. This lack of parental support has warped his view of himself into believing that he isn't really worth anything. So when he is visited by Misato and told about the opportunity to pilot an Eva, the opportunity to be useful not only to humanity but to his father, leads him to visiting the nerve facility where the Evas are stored. I find it interesting that despite Shinji's father being relatively dormant in his life, he still seeks some sort of acceptance and acknowledgement from his father, some form of appreciation, which is something that children of parents do naturally, as it's extremely important to children for their parents to express their love for them, even if that means that Shinji has to pilot the Eva to do so. This ties into Shinji's struggle with escapism, as his blind fantasy of if he pilots the Eva he will be loved merely plays as a distraction to the fact that his father really didn't love him, with Shinji in a sense trying to escape from the reality by creating a fantasy world in which his father would love him. This is such a subtle way to represent and visualize Shinji's childlike state and naive mind, and is also a clear statement that his worth doesn't come from him as a person, but rather his ability to pilot the Eva, with Shinji slowly beginning to accept this as fact. As when Shinji goes to visit his father and is unsure on his feelings on whether he should pilot the Eva or not, his father in a sense tells him that he is basically worthless, and that if he won't pilot the Eva, to just leave.
If you're going to do it now. If not, then leave.
This reinforces this perception onto Shinji that to have any form of worth from his father's eyes and the eyes of the other adults, he needs to pilot the Eva. After the other adults beg for Shinji to pilot the Eva, he relents and decides to pilot it. And while his first battle doesn't go super well, he does just well enough to receive some praise.
I think I finally understood the good part about being praised by someone when I heard my father's words today. And I also realized that the reason I pilot my Eva is to hear those words from him.
Which further helps to support not only to the viewers who only see Shinji as the pilot of the Eva, but to Shinji himself that his only form of worth in the world is piloting the Eva. The main cast of characters that the anime follows, that being Shinji, Rei, and Asuka, come from all different walks of life, but their reasons for piloting the Eva is inextricably tied to the themes of personal worth. Quick side note, before I continue, I'm going to get into spoiler territory for the rest of the video, so if you don't want to be spoiled, I suggest you click off the video.
Why should we?
Shinji is the most integral character of the anime, and what I like about him the most is how the anime explores his character and his flaws. When Shinji first starts piloting the Eva, you can tell he's not that great, and that is one aspect I appreciate, is that he has to learn the long and hard way and put in countless hours into mastering the Eva before he becomes any good with it.
Position target in the center and pull the switch. Position target in the center and pull the switch. Position target in the center.
While this is usually something you would praise, Shinji's only real reason for working so hard is for the appreciation of others. He has no form of self-worth and constantly needs that boost from those around him telling him he's doing a good job, which only happens when he pilots the Eva. Shinji, for most of the anime, isn't able to realize his own worth because he doesn't actively go out and talk with the other people at the facility in an attempt to get along with them. He just kind of expects people to love him unconditionally without doing anything, which is one of his major flaws. As because he's unable to really communicate with anyone and can't start any friendships with anyone at Nerve, in his mind, if he's not piloting the Eva, he's worthless. When in fact, it's because the people around him are basically his work colleagues and outside of work are nothing more than strangers that he barely knows a thing about. Shinji is afraid of people hating him, but at the same time never gives anyone the opportunity to get to know him, as his fear of rejection drives him to isolate himself from a lot of the other characters in the anime, with one of the defining moments in the anime coming when Kaworu is introduced, who is someone that goes out of his way to have that friendship with Shinji and get along with him. Shinji at this point finally gets his wish for someone to understand him and treat him like a normal human being. And it's this relationship that brings into question Shinji's sexuality, which is something that is discussed throughout the anime. But while it is clear, especially in the original non-Netflix version of the anime, that both Kaworu and Shinji share an interest in one another, they're both in very different ways. Shinji is much more selfish, as he finally has someone who understands him and appreciates him without him even having to do anything, to which Shinji wants to ensure that he can have that feeling forever, whereas it is very different from Kaworu's perspective, as it's later revealed that he is another angel sent to destroy humanity. But when he meets Shinji, he sees a part of humanity he has never seen before. Shinji is a very honest person, even if he denies it throughout the anime. So when Kaworu, who is someone who doesn't really understand humans and their customs, sees the pain and struggle to find happiness and just how important the people in Shinji's life mean to him, and that despite all the pain Shinji has been put through, he constantly tries to do the right thing. And it's through Shinji that Kaworu realizes that humanity deserves the right to live and experiences happiness. He loves Shinji in the sense that he showed him a completely different view on life and is able to see the world in a much more positive outlook. Kaworu loves him for this, which is why he sacrifices himself for the sake of humanity. While I do think that there is some form of romantical love between Kaworu and Shinji, they're both for two very different reasons. And I appreciate that the anime is not afraid to have the main character be attracted to both genders for different reasons. Asuka is actually very similar to Shinji in a lot of ways, but at the same time has some clear differences, as both of their mothers were experimented on by Nerve. But while Shinji's mother died, Asuka's mother instead went insane and refused to acknowledge Asuka as her own daughter, which eventually led to her mother committing suicide. Both of these characters feel a sense of fulfillment from their roles as Eva pilots. But Asuka is much more braggadocious, as she is constantly wearing her hair clips that identify her as an Eva pilot, wanting to let everyone know who she is and what she does. The main difference between them was how Asuka long since knew she was going to be an Eva pilot and has trained years to master it, while Shinji was merely thrown into the role without any experience or knowledge and was expected to have it mastered faster than anyone before. They both have had their fair share of unfortunate events that, despite being similar, have shaped and molded their characters in two different ways. Shinji is a character who is very uncomfortable with himself. He has no real self-esteem to speak of and is rather timid, as he merely seeks someone who will like him for himself. Shinji, as discussed earlier, is also a much more honest person with his emotions, and when he becomes comfortable around someone, isn't afraid to talk to them, as what he is afraid of is rejection. While Asuka, on the other hand, is much more aggressive and in your face. She speaks very bluntly and isn't afraid to speak her mind on the surface level. She wants to remain strong in the eyes of everyone around her and instead decides to repress all of her emotions due to Asuka being scarred by witnessing her mother's death, as she is afraid and hesitant to become vulnerable in front of others, which she does eventually do later in the series. Despite Asuka still having a family, as she still has her father and a stepmother, she is just as alone as Shinji. As for Asuka, while she doesn't hate her stepmother, in her eyes she could never replace her real mother.
Wow, you two were on the phone quite a while.
Well, it was just a routine communication.
I wish I talked to my family.
It's overrated, and it's just for show. She's not my real mother anyway.
And one of the most important developments in Asuka's character comes later in the series, where after a tough battle, she is no longer able to pilot the Eva. This is one of the major turning points for Asuka's character, as she is forced to see the world in a different light, where she is no longer a pilot of the Eva Unit 2 and is instead just an ordinary 13-year-old girl from Germany. This leads her into a very clear depression that helps to reaffirm that Asuka's outlook on life and who she is as a person is purely based on her being an Eva pilot. So when she eventually becomes unable to pilot the Eva, she thinks that she has no value. And I believe the reason why she clashes with Shinji so often in the anime is because Shinji is the manifestation of all of her repressed emotions, someone who is insecure and seeks people's love and acceptance. So every time she lashes out at Shinji and it seems like she hates him, she really just hates herself, and it's Shinji's presence that helps her to confront this. Despite how similar some of their situations are, I find it interesting as to how differently each individual has coped with their situations, with there being both positive and negatives to each approach, as neither Asuka nor Shinji being better than the other in dealing with the situation and hands they've been dealt with in life. Rei is the most mysterious character amongst the three, as not much is known about her for a long part of the anime, and it isn't towards the final act of the anime that we learn about who Rei is and was, as when she is first introduced to Shinji, she is rather shy and observant. She is not quick to make friends, but also not to make enemies. It is almost like she's observing Shinji and his actions in an attempt to understand his character. She appears to be a regular human girl, but also leaves an unnerving impression that doesn't strictly seem human, as she lacks a varied set of emotions. And as the anime continues, she becomes closer with Shinji and eventually opens to those around her. But what's interesting is that she always particularly seems interested in Shinji more than any other character, which is clear in her actions throughout the anime and how she behaves around him compared to other characters. This is when it's revealed in the final act of the anime that Rei is nothing more than a clone of his dead mother, Yui, created by Gendo, his father, as a coping mechanism to help him deal with the loss of his wife. And this is what helps to cement Rei's connection to Shinji, as in some weird way, he was able to be with his mother again, just in another body. Rei's identity is hard to understand. While she does certainly share similarities with the personality of Yui, there is also something extra about the character that makes it unique from just a clone. Something more. I would describe it closer to another child of Gendo and Yui than strictly a clone of just Yui. There are clearly differences in their personalities, as Yui was always warm and kind-hearted, which plays differently to Rei, who appears more dejected. But at the same time, there are essences of Yui within that of Rei, such as her self-sacrificing nature when she dies to destroy the 16th angel, Armasol. But by that point, she had changed so much thanks to the influences of Shinji, and it's clear that she holds some feeling for Shinji towards the end of the anime. Despite it seeming otherwise, there are multiple Reis that appear over the course of the anime, with Rei number 1 being killed by Naoki Akagi after Rei revealed that Gendo didn't love her, which led her to take her own life soon after. It's also very possible that Rei is aware that she is not entirely human and may even know that she is a clone. There are moments that hint towards this throughout the anime. like how she has access to more information than most other characters, and how she even hints that she can be replaced, knowing to some extent that she isn't strictly human. There was clearly an expectation for Rei to follow orders and pilot the Eva, which has a big impact on Rei's mental well-being, as she knew that she could just be replaced if she wasn't doing what she was told.
I am not a doll.
You are! You do anything you're ordered to, don't you? You'd kill yourself if your commander told you to, wouldn't you?
Of course.
As revealed with horrific imagery that there are countless clones of Rei that are waiting to be used, all insurance for if Rei were to ever die or misbehave, which explains why she was so much more observant and timid at the start of the anime when Shinji first encounters her. Shinji's Eva that he pilots, Unit 01, is much closer to his mother than Rei. No one else seems to be accepted by the Eva other than Shinji. And in a very similar way with Asuka, Eva Unit 2, where it's believed that part of her mother became a part of the Eva, for Shinji, his mother Yui fused with Eva Unit 01 and seemed to become a part of the machine, which is clear in episode 20 as after Shinji achieves a high synchronization rate and becomes absorbed into the LCL liquid of the Eva, he comes in contact with his mother. And that the reason that no one else can pilot the Eva is probably to do with the fact that she was Shinji's mother and simply wouldn't allow anyone that she didn't have a mother-child relationship to pilot Eva 01, which was a sad and emotional scene that reflects how much she really cared for Shinji and how important she was in Shinji's life. The anime also brings into question the actions that the characters make throughout the anime, and whether or not humanity deserves its fate at the hand of the angels. As side characters like Misato show the ugly and dark side of an adult, as when her love gets rejected, she projects that love onto Shinji and sexually assaults him, which twists his perception of what love is. Gendo also appears as more of a villain than any other angel ever is. Broken by the death of his wife, he isn't above murder and manipulation to get what he wants, which merely turns out to be the selfish, suicidal goal of reconnecting with his dead wife through the Human Instrumentality Project, the basic concept of which was to overcome all of humanity's weaknesses and flaws by combining everyone's consciousness together into Lilith's eggs at the moment of the third impact. Lilith, who is the second angel, who is the ancestor of all of humanity, has spent a long time collecting the souls of humanity, which is why other characters that are deceased are visible in the Human Instrumentality Project. And it's here where Shinji confronts himself and everyone he has ever known, as Shinji, who has spent the majority of the anime under the belief that his entire purpose in life is derived from piloting the Eva, and that if he doesn't pilot the Eva, everyone will hate him, finally reaches its climax, as Shinji, while spending time inside the Instrumentality Project, reaches an epiphany, and realizes that it isn't that everyone hates him, but rather that he hates himself. And once he realizes that nothing will change with who he is until he learns to love himself, and that he actually wants to live as an individual being, with the I am I line in episode 26 being used as a form to express his individuality and willingness to reject the connections around him in favor for living his life for himself.
That's right! I am no more or less than myself! I am me! I want to be myself!
Which causes him to leave the instrumentality and return to the real world. I believe that Neon Genesis Evangelion is one of the most important animes of all time, and confronts the topics of self-worth and loving yourself in such a brutally honest way. Being able to find your own joy and appreciation in who you are as a person, instead of from someone else or because of your actions. This anime does not sugarcoat anything. Every character has their flaws that define them as a human being, and help to show the individualism from one another. The anime isn't afraid to make you question about who the real villains are, as some of the actions the characters take is downright evil. In fact, the imagery and depiction of the angels, along with the biblical references the anime makes, could easily be represented as the angels coming down from heaven to purge the earth of humanity for all of their sins. But despite all the outside factors that make up Neon Genesis Evangelion, at its very core, it's a human story of connection that I think many people can relate to, one that feels even more real due to the creator's own experience with depression at the time. In my eyes, Evangelion is the story about an abandoned and confused boy who wants to be loved, and sees his role as the pilot of the Eva as the only way to achieve this, only to finally realize that he is just as important as anyone else regardless of who he is, and is able to come to terms with himself and learn to embrace who he is instead of rejecting it, realizing he's not perfect, but no one is. I don't think there has been an anime that has captured the human psyche quite like Evangelion, and I don't know if we ever will. Thank you all for watching. This was a video I was incredibly passionate about and really enjoyed making. So I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you did, drop a like and I'll see you in the next one.